Microsoft announces the consoles that they weren't supposed to. Apple fixes everything wrong with their devices and adds Apple Intelligence. And the Ryzen 9000 series can be overclocked? Let's get in the hot news, everybody. I'm your Brett host. We're going to be going over the hottest tech news I can find on the internet while you enjoy your breakfast this Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. We're going to start off today talking about the Summer Games Fest announcement that Microsoft gave with regards to the new consoles that they're going to be launching. But it turns out it's just a refresh of the consoles that are currently already out on the market. That includes a brand new digital edition of the Series X to match the digital edition of the PS5, and it's going to come in robot white. And a special edition Series X with a 2TB SSD and a Galaxy Black color scheme, and a Series S with a 1TB SSD, but instead of being carbon black like it was before, now it's robot white. And all of this seems okay. The digital Series X is going to cost $449, which is a $50 price drop. The Series X 2TB is going to cost $600, which is a $100 price increase, and the Series S 1TB is going to be an increase of around $50 to be about $350, which all of this doesn't seem like outlandish pricing. It honestly is just about the same as taking the original console and adding in the cost of like a storage expansion card minus all of the fancy need for the housing. It's just the cost of storage, although one would presume Microsoft could get a cheaper deal on it. It just feels like they're charging everybody specifically for the storage. But you might remember that back when Microsoft was trying to acquire Activision Blizzard, we got a leaked detail at the roadmap that we were supposed to get, and this was not the future that was supposed to hit us in 2024. We were supposed to get a brand new Xbox controller, which is good for both xCloud and for playing locally, but then more importantly, a cylindrical refresh to the Series X known as Brooklyn. It's going to have faster Wi-Fi, it was going to have better power efficiency, it was going to have 2TB storage, but most importantly, came in at the same price point of $499. None of that's true. Microsoft is just dropping more expensive consoles 3.5 years into the console lifespan and making it so that you just have to pay more in case you want the upgrade, which you could have done all along. You could have gotten a D-brand skin to change your Xbox Series X and been in the same boat years ago. But Microsoft does want to do things slightly differently, with them announcing that they are working on a handheld, with Phil Spencer saying that he thinks they should do a handheld and that the team is working on different form factors and different ways to play, specifically saying that playing games locally is really important, so it's not likely that it's going to be something like a PlayStation Portal or an over Wi-Fi situation, but rather something that can natively play the games, which honestly isn't too outlandish of a thought. The ROG Ally has more performance than the Xbox Series S, so it makes sense that they could get some performance parity with their lower end console. You likely wouldn't get a handheld that could compete with the Series X, but definitely a Series S. This is one of the tricky things that Sony's had with their PlayStation 5 setup, is that getting a handheld that can perform like a PS5, we're not quite there yet. But if it's a PS4, which is the rumor that Sony might come out with, then they could definitely do that. But Silverstone is definitely doing things differently, especially since we got to see them at Computex 2024, and they're taking all of their PC hardware building experience and then turning that into making it so that you can build not only stylish but fully functional workstations as well. They had many different things to show off, like the Alta D1 case, which allows you to build hyper-converged systems, which allows you to have things like 2 power supplies for redundant power solutions, tons of drives, multiple 5.25-inch drive bays, and between 7 and 11 PCI Express slots so that you can fit as many GPUs as you're computationally needed for whatever it is that you're doing. And this is part of Silverstone's philosophy that they're going to be building into a lot of their cases. They want them to be workstation ready, and that includes them having SSI EEB motherboard support in order to make sure that it's ready to go for the workstation. You might remember that we actually did a PC build in a previous version of an Alta, the Alta F2, as you can see here, and we ended up giving that PC away. It was huge, it was massive, it was highly performant for a case, but the Alta D1 takes things a step further by, again, having that multiple power supply support. And one of the other things that Silverstone showed off at Computex was their Hella 2500R power supply. I thought it was ridiculous when we had the Hella 2050R, which has a lot of power for basically anything that you could need to build a PC for. The 2500R has support for enough to power 4 RTX 4090s. and they showed the Alta D1 using 2 of those power supplies in a single setup. Silverstone's getting real serious about making sure that they're ready for your computational needs, so you can check everything they showed off at Computex out at the link in the video description. Big thanks to them for sponsoring our trip out to Computex and for sponsoring this episode of Hot News. And while Silverstone's got you covered for your powerful computing needs, let's talk about spatial computing and everything else that Apple had to show off at their first day of WWDC yesterday, because they had announcements coming out for essentially every device that they made. They have new Vision OS, new iPad OS, new iOS, new things for their AirPods, new Mac OS known as Sequoia, as well as then talking about Apple Intelligence, which is what they're going to be calling AI. They're dubbing it AI for the rest of us. But let's start off with the thing that's going to actually most practically impact my life personally, and that's the Vision OS upgrades. I'll keep it quick. I know a lot of people don't have Vision Pros, but it's making it so that you get a super ultra-wide virtual Mac monitor, so you can either get it regular ultra-wide, which looks like 21:9, or 32:9, where it's the equivalent of having 2 4K screens side by side. Absolutely incredible. Instead of offering multiple Mac screens, you get a super large one that can accommodate essentially 2. Additionally, they're making it so that there's more ease of access for accessing the home menu or seeing the battery life and the time, something that wasn't baked in at launch. They're also making it so that you can convert all 2D photos into 3D spatial ones using what they called machine learning, which Apple very, very much did not say AI a whole lot during their WWDC keynote. They stuck to deep learning, intelligence, machine learning, algorithms. They did not talk about AI a ton except for where they had to, and it mostly was in the context of generative AI. On top of that, there's travel mode for trains. It has mouse support, and additionally, it is now an AirPlay receiver, which means you can cast your phone or your iPad or various other devices to your actual Vision Pro in case you want to do that. But one of the big announcements was iOS 18, because for the first time, you can now move your apps on iOS to be in positions as you want them. You can also redecorate around, making it so that your icons can be different colors, which, as this XDA article points out, welcome to the year 2008 iPhone users. But additionally, they announced that you're going to have satellite support for texting on the latest iPhones, and it's also going to have new emoji tapback so that you can add emojis to your reactions in iMessages. Send later in messages is coming. You can reorganize your icons. There's a new game mode that turns off background tasks to make it so that it's prioritizing games. But one of the things that they barely mentioned on stage that everybody was really hyped about, RCS messaging support right there. They put it on the slide. They barely said anything about it. But they also said things about their new Passwords app, which is going to be a password manager similar to 1Password, LastPass, and various others, but now it's going to be baked into the various ecosystem that Apple has, and it's going to work on Windows as well. No mention of Android, because the way it works on Windows is via iCloud, so that likely will preclude it from working on Android, but it's going to be a keychain setup that is now going to be multiple across devices, and that you can use it in a different way than previously. And the AirPods also got an update, just a small little one, so that if you have an incoming message and Siri asks if you want to answer the call, you can nod your head to say yes to it or shake your head to say no, so that you don't actually have to talk until the person starts speaking to you, which is cool, I guess. Then we got iPad OS getting a few updates. A lot of the same things that you saw in iOS. You got the game mode, you got the control center customization, text effects. But finally, notably, is the calculator is finally on the iPad. This is something that Apple said that they would not do until they could do it in a way that felt good to the iPad. And it sounds farcical, but it actually was kind of neat, because they made it so that it can do live math for you if you happen to write down equations in the calculator app using the Apple Pencil. They had this example on screen where if you're trying to calculate it like you would a regular calculator, but you want to do written version instead of actually typing the numbers in, it can compute all of that for you. It also supports variables so that you can actually write and graph things out in the calculator app natively. I saw a lot of comments of people being like, oh, this is going to make kids dumber because they don't know how to actually compute things. But you still have to like write things down. It's the same idea as like a graphing calculator, but now it's just more naturally processing in terms of handwriting instead of actually having to type it in on little buttons on a TI-84. Then, as mentioned, with game mode that's coming to both iPhone and iPad, it's going to do those things like lower background tasks to make sure that the priority is on the game, but they also did show off with Ubisoft that they're going to have Assassin's Creed Shadows launching on Mac and all of the latest M iPads as well as the latest iPhones, so that there's going to be more gaming done on Mac. They additionally announced new updates to their Metal API to potentially make it easier for game devs to port things over to Mac, and then also make it easier for, once it's ported to Mac, to then also be translationed over to the iPad and iPhone. Then for Mac OS, which is now known as Mac OS Sequoia, there is a whole bunch of Apple Intelligence features, but one of the cool things that they showed off was that it has now built-in iPhone mirroring, so that you can interact with your iPhone directly on your Mac without having to wake up the iPhone. It can stay locked or it can stay in standby mode while you actively use it, which is helpful, especially when you consider that not every mobile app is the same as what you can access on desktop. There's also various things that are just better to use on mobile because developers pay more attention to the iPhone than they do the Mac OS setup. So it's just a neat little helpful feature, which is what they really tried to communicate when it comes to Apple Intelligence. They want you to think of AI being just regularly useful to you. They showed off Siri being AI infused with Apple Intelligence, more natural language processing. It's going to be able to do things for you in specific apps that actually are programmed for it. They showed off that they will have an API for this so that app developers can make it so that Siri can interact with your apps on your behalf and also natively understand what it is that you're trying to ask Siri to do. There's also things like summarizing email as well as rewriting email or changing different tones. All of that generative AI you've seen in things like Grammarly or in Gmail are now going to be coming over to the iPhone. They're also bringing image generation in case you want that. And they also announced their partnership with ChatGPT and OpenAI for Siri, and it's going to be happening for free. You do not need an account for it. They also showed off that they're going to have Genmojis, generative AI emojis that you can use to respond to everybody's messages, which Marquez Brownlee pointing out that, yeah, they had added RCS support, but if the Genmoji is sent to somebody with an Android phone, is it just going to be a JPEG instead of like an actual emoji? It was all pretty neat. Apple did focus a lot on the security aspect of AI, artificial intelligence. A lot of what's going to be worked on is going to be done locally on the device or in what they described as a closed cloud computing system that's very private, owned by Apple, run only on Apple Silicon, not being externally shared, and then it's only the request that you're putting into that that's getting shared with the server. It's not being logged, and it's supposedly going to be verified by third parties that it is indeed being kept encrypted and secure and not necessarily something that's being manipulated, which you could trust Apple for, or you could wait until there's actual third-party evidence that this is happening. But it does seem to be a little bit more than what other companies are saying on the aspect of trying to make sure that your data is safe. Apple definitely focused on that. A lot of it's processed on device, so you don't even need to go to the cloud. But for things like the image generation that they showed off, or anything that might be a little bit more computationally intense for the AI, is going to be offloaded to that secure cloud setup. But then additionally, with the OpenAI thing, one of the things that Apple has said is that they're going to bring out support for many different models and engines of AI to be integrated into iPhone for you to use however you want. So ChatGPT is just the start, but they also talked in a follow-up interview that they're open to bringing Google's Gemini model into the iPhone ecosystem. Probably also things like Meta's Llama model. All of that can be rolled into being natively supported on the iPhone. However, those things are not being depicted as being secure and running only on Apple's own cloud computing stuff that's really secure, and it's also going to be consent based. You have to say yes every single time that you actually want to run ChatGPT instead of just running it integrated into Apple's model. So it's a neat little future. I saw a lot of commentary around the idea that Apple just killed a ton of startups, specifically ones that are essentially just ChatGPT wrappers. But while Apple is not first here, it does appear like they are doing it in the most Apple usable way possible, especially since, at least from my perspective, a lot of the AI that we're seeing out there that's being marketed with these large language models, these multimodal engines, they're not necessarily artificial intelligence. That's just the marketing that has been used in order to convince us that this is something new and fresh, when it's the same machine learning, deep learning stuff that's been going on for the last few years, but just kind of hit a convergence point of being more usable. Apple did make a note to talk about that. A lot of the things that they're bringing to people in Apple Intelligence is stuff they've been developing since they came out with their neural processing unit back in 2018. This is not a fresh thing for hardly anybody, and so the idea that consumers want AI all the time, we saw this at Computex, is an exercise in marketing. And what company has built their brand off of marketing their hardware probably better than all companies out there? Apple. And so, of course, they're going to brand their Apple Intelligence in a way that's going to be effective marketing for making generative AI very useful to the end consumer in a way that's nice and tightly packaged and is AI for the rest of us. And it won't be for the rest of Hot News, but Reece should have deals for you right now.
Yo, welcome back to UFD Deals, bringing the hottest tech deals out on the internet. Feels like it's been a while since I've done one of these, and it is freezing in South Africa. I don't know what to do with myself. It was so nice and warm in Taiwan, and now I'm cold. I know. Deals. Today we have a triple threat of cooling, cases, and CPUs, starting with the up here 120mm 3-pack of ARGB case fans for only $9.99, making them $10 or 50% off for, hey, 3-pack. You know, go wild. And if you want something to put them in that won't necessarily match, we have this NZXT H7 Flow mid-tower ATX case available in white for only $99.99, making it $30 off. And then lastly, we have the amazing AMD Ryzen 9 7900X3D going for only $329, making it $170.99 off. And hey, with that, the deals are done. You can find these and more linked in the video description down below. But until next time, I'm gonna go get warm because it's freaking cold. Goodbye.
Well, Reece, while Apple's showing off the latest in their intelligence, Nokia's showing off the latest in their calling technology. They made the world's first spatial audio phone call. No, this is not Nokia, the phone brand. This is actually the R&D division that actually helps build out cellular technology. Same technical company, except for they sold the rights to the handset manufacturing to somebody else, so it's not even the same company anymore. But this is a big deal because spatial audio is something that can now natively be built into phone calls with the next generation of 5G, also known as 5G Advanced. This uses a new codec that, instead of using all of the microphones that are on your smartphone for voice isolation and noise rejection, it can start using them for extra processing to make it so that it can sound like you're hearing somebody in stereo, because all phone calls up until this point have been monophonic. 5G Advanced is something that Nokia is working on. It's supposed to make things faster, more efficient. It's also supposed to have a really good timing setup where GPS isn't necessary to keep time because 5G Advanced can build it in. This isn't necessarily something revolutionary, it's just kind of cool. It's a new advancement in trying to make cellular technology slightly better. I know a lot of people are probably rolling their eyes at 5G Advanced, which to some extent they are behind the timeline. It was supposed to already be out by now, but there are legitimate engineering advancements and improvements that have to be made in order for all of this to develop. So I'm here for it. I want to see more about it, and I want to see more about the X3D chips coming out from AMD, and according to reports, we might be getting them sooner rather than later. According to somebody who talked to people at Computex, they found out that they should be coming out in September, which is very soon because it's June right now, and the 9000 series doesn't launch till July. So that would mean that there's only a 2 months difference between when the regular chips come out and the X3D. Video Cards put out this handy little timeline showing you that for the Ryzen 5000, it was a 17-month difference. For the Ryzen 7000, it was a 7-month difference, and now for the 9000, allegedly, it's only going to be 2 months. I find this slightly difficult to believe. However, we got to change the timelines a little bit here, because yes, the Ryzen 7000 was 7 months in terms of when the launch actually happened, but the 7800X3D was actually announced in January. So that was only 4 months between the 7000 launch and the X3D announcement, and so we could potentially be seeing something like that here. Early June for the 9000 announcement, July for the release, and then September for the announcement of the X3D, and then we get the launch probably sometime in November, December, if not January. I didn't really hear anything from anybody on the show floor of Computex talking to all of our sources about when X3D is going to launch, so I would take all of this with a grain of salt, but supposedly it's supposed to line up with the launch of the X870E motherboards. We'll see if that happens. But I can tell you, as the days go by, I'm still very intrigued by Ryzen 9000, and now we're getting leaked benchmarks of the Ryzen 9600X, and we're getting some details that help us to understand why and how this thing is going to be better than the Ryzen 7000 series. So starting off with some benchmarks showing off the L1 and L2 cache improvements. We're looking at roughly 80% faster L1 and L2 cache read, write, and copy, which is significant, and the latency increase is only 14%. So this could be one of the ways that AMD is coming out and saying that they have roughly a 15% gaming boost with these chips. They've improved the L1 and L2 cache quite significantly. But also, according to that same leaker, what we're finding out is that the 9600X actually has some overclocking potential. This is something that has been atypical for Ryzen chips, simply because AMD's been shipping them as close to the top of the silicon range as they can whenever they've come out with their Ryzen CPUs. They've made it so that there's things like precision boost overdrive, and you could do some minor tweaking when it came to Ryzen, but it was nothing that was actually significant. But it looks like the 9600X is going to have more overclocking headroom than the previous generation. The leaker was able to get the 9600X up from a 5.4 gigahertz clock speed up to 5.7, which resulted in a considerable gain, at least in the CPU-Z benchmark. Compare that to the 7600X benchmark, and that could only get between 1 and 150 megahertz boost. So getting a double increase in terms of raw clock speed advantage on the 9600X is kind of neat. I want to see if this could be pushed further in the hands of a overclocker or just regular old you and me, or potentially there's new technology that AMD is going to be talking about with precision boost overdrive, making it so these 9000 series chips can go faster than what they're specifically saying on the box, or we're back to the days of overclocking. And it's AMD's turn to allow you to up the clock speed. Maybe. This is, I haven't heard it from anybody. I'm just spitting off the dome. 6 gigahertz. That'd be nice if you could overclock it that far. I want that. And I also want to read your comments. So let's look at your comments from yesterday's videos. We had the Asetek Computex video that we released. We had Bristol McSnout saying, this Computex is incredible. I wish that I could also go there. I mean, we did stream it. If you want to catch it next year, we're likely going to stream walking around the show floor, talking and seeing everything that's out and available. In case you can't actually make it to Taiwan, we do IRL streams at Computex. Then Nick Northcutt saying, one of the coolest things at Computex. And then Francisco saying, an actual real AI use case. No way. AI and geometry model optimization for fluid dynamics is not new AI tech, but a great demonstration of a practical use case. Yes, that's one of the things that Asetek made sure to make notice of when it came to their 3D printed cold plates. This is not an AI cold plate. This is not actually going to be used for AI processors, although it can cool those. It's just AI and machine learning was used in the computational models to make sure that they're getting the correct flow pattern through all of the channels to make it so that this thing is more performant than it was before, which that's actually something AI is really competent at. But let's look at your comments from yesterday's episode of Hot News. We got The Legend of Terry saying, what people didn't get is that if Microsoft is forcing biometrics for recall, this is not good. They've got your data. Now they have your biometrics all in one neat little package, to which many people responded, number one, recall is now opt-in, so they're not forcing you to do it at all. Number two, they've had biometrics. They've had both fingerprint and face unlock for Windows Hello for years. Microsoft has that if you've given that to them. You could also simply not opt into recall and not use Windows Hello. Those are both things that you are capable of doing, and I don't necessarily see a problem with Microsoft making it so that there's further authentication steps before you can access recalls, so that it's not just stored in plain text for everybody to access. I see no problem here. There could be arguments and cases made to like, oh, it's only opt-in for now, they're going to change that in the future, in which case we'll deal with that when we get there. As it stands currently, it's opt-in, so you don't have to worry about it. It's turned off by default, and the biometric stuff is, again, opt in. You don't have to do it, so just it's okay. Then Daniel said, great Computex coverage, UFD team. You guys take it this year. UFD was my first go-to channel for everything Computex and so much more. Love the non-stop stream and all the inside views you gave us. Kyler killed it. He did do a good job. Thank you, Kyler, for all your hard work at Computex. And then Vado saying, there's AI that writes stories and draws, but there's no AI that do my laundry or fold my clothes. Does AI really help humanity or just prove that we're only good at doing physical work? Man, we're meat sacks, powered by a small organ up here. I'm mostly flesh that can lift and push and throw, and I articulate and gesticulate. I can do a masticate if you want. That means to chew, by the way. Don't take that further than it's supposed to be. Like, our bodies are designed for physical work. Yeah, like we got that going on. The brain is just a small part of it. And robots are hard to build. So I'm done. This is a long episode of Hot News. I'll catch you back here for more of the hottest tech news tomorrow.